Welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. Today we are talking about perfectionism and about being your real self. My name is Katie Allen and this is Self-Love Ignited. Let's get to it. All right, guys, welcome back. Today we are talking about perfectionism and being your real, authentic self. Okay, and as I am recording this, if you're watching the video, you can see there is a very messy background. I am house sitting for a friend at the moment, and this is the spare room, and I've just covered up a bunch of stuff on her desk, and there are 3 dogs out in the rest of the house who may or may not make noise during this. And I thought that what a perfect episode to record while in this environment. All right. So, the dangers of perfectionism and why real is better. That's really what I want to talk about today. Quite often, when I talk to people about their challenges with self love, self esteem, self confidence, body image, right? It's all interrelated. Quite often, it comes down to I'm not enough, right? I don't measure up. There is some invisible standard that I do not meet. Therefore, I'm not good enough. I am not worthy. I am not, fill in the blank, whatever it happens to be. And there really is this idea that, we are all, or we should, quote unquote, should all be striving for perfection, the perfect body, whatever that even is, right? But I mean, society has an idea of what it is. It is white, it is tall, it is slim, it is athletic. You have to have a big bum, you have tiny waist, big boobs, right? Like that currently in Western culture, that is what is deemed desirable. We do know that that changes depending on the era that you're in and depending on the country that you go to. But generally speaking, right now, that is the sort of beauty ideal. But this shows up in so many different ways, right? You're supposed to have the quote unquote perfect body, perfect, unblemished, unmarked skin. Again, if you are watching the video of this and you can see me, my skin looks really good. I have a really good camera. This is not actually what my skin always looks like, right? This is just how it's captured on camera. If you could see me in person, you would see that I have wrinkles. You would see that I have, those like the pores on my nose. I have a pimple down here on my neck. Like I'm a real person. But there's this idea that we're supposed to have perfect skin, perfect hair. I got a good messy bun situation happening. The perfect life, perfect relationship, perfect money situation. If you're a parent, you're supposed to have perfect children. If you have pets, they should be perfectly behaved and perfectly groomed. There is this idea that we should all be striving for perfection, and I am calling bullshit on it. Why? Because perfection does not exist. And this unending striving for perfection is doing a lot of damage. It's doing a lot of damage to ourselves, to our psyches, to our mental health, to our emotional health. I believe it's very damaging for relationships. I think it can be damaging for business. I think it can be damaging in friendships for a lot of different things, right? Because when we are pursuing this idea of perfection, we're not being our real selves because you're not perfect, right? And there's a few other reasons. Like number one, I really just want to say, even if you happen to have some sort of outward appearance of perfection, right? Maybe you have hit that the benchmark somewhere of like, where people look at you and go, oh wow, she's got it all together. She's perfect. She has the perfect skin. She has the perfect body. She has the perfect relationship. The fact is, you don't, because nobody is perfect, right? And it is absolutely exhausting trying to keep that up. I've talked to people in the past who've suffered from eating disorders, and they say that as they were really like in the deepest, darkest depths of their eating disorder, when they just had the worst relationship with food, when they were abusing their bodies, but they were losing weight and looking closer to that stereotypical societal ideal, they were getting outward praise. People were going, wow, whatever you're doing, it's working. Wow, you look great. But they were literally killing themselves. They were literally killing themselves. So it is, you can't keep it up if you want to stay alive, if you happen to be in that eating disorder situation. and you want to stay alive, you can't keep it up. You can't. It's impossible. And even if we're not talking about food, I also just want to interject and say that I'm not an eating disorder specialist. That is not what I'm trained in. I also have not ever suffered from an eating disorder. This is just hearsay from other people that I've had conversations with. Okay. Um, but I mean, even if we're not talking about food, maybe we're talking about business, right? I have an online business. I know that many of my listeners, many of you guys also have online businesses. There is this constant striving to have the perfect Instagram feed and the perfect Facebook page and the perfect, packages and the perfect website and the perfect photos and the perfect everything. And that is exhausting. And that is how you get burnt out. That is how you get burnt out. Excuse me. And I'm just going to be totally real and say I've been feeling a lot of burnout lately. I have been feeling it, and I've been doing a lot of talking to other people about it and reflecting on where my burnout is coming from. And I think that, it is coming from lots of different places and different areas of my life, and it's impacting on my business at the moment. But another big part of my burnout has been this sort of striving to make sure that I am putting out a good face. Not perfection necessarily, but like making sure that I'm like meeting that level, that threshold that I've determined for myself. And it's exhausting and it's impossible. Hence recording in a bedroom with a messy background and hair that's not done, because you know what? I firmly believe that I've got to lead by example if I'm talking about this. So I promise you are going to be getting even more of the real me in the future. But I mean, it's true, right? If you're striving for perfection constantly, it is exhausting and you are going to burn yourself out and potentially do yourself a lot of harm, depending on where this is showing up in your life. The other thing when we are stuck on striving for perfection is that it breeds self-comparison. That is like the hotbed of self-comparison when we are always striving for perfection, because you know what? Nobody strives for perfection when they are feeling 100% secure and solid and excited about themselves and where they're at. We strive for perfection when we feel inadequate, when we feel like we are lacking something, when we feel like we don't measure up. That is when we strive for perfection, right? That is when we start thinking, oh, something's missing. Something is missing. And really, this has to do with a few things. Number one, it is ourselves, right? And that inner sort of lack of confidence, whatever it may be, when we feel like we're missing something. But this is also because other people in the world are also striving for perfection, because guess what? You are not unique in not feeling like you measure up, right? This is like a society-wide issue at the moment. But when other people are maybe closer to what you deem as perfect, maybe they have achieved something that is closer to what you deem as sort of ideal, then that's the highlight reel. And then you start comparing yourself against their highlight reel. Right. And I think that Instagram is a perfect example of this, because it is primarily a visual form of media, right? It's all about like reels and stories, and it's not something like Facebook where there's a lot more writing involved usually and a lot more links. Instagram is generally a lot more visual. So it's just a good example, but this does totally happen everywhere. We look at somebody else's Instagram and we scroll down through their feed and we look at their stories and we go, wow, she's really got it together. First of all, look at this feed. It's beautiful and curated, and she has all of her brand colors in here. And these photos are clearly professionally done. They're not just selfies. And, and there's a pattern, and maybe she alternates with beautiful quotes and these gorgeous photos. And like, there's just no way that I could ever measure up to this. And I just can't. And then that breeds that self-comparison, and it makes you feel even worse about yourself, which ironically makes you try to be even more perfect, which makes you feel even worse about yourself, right? So when we are stuck in that self-comparison game, that breeds, it breeds that self-comparison, and we get stuck on looking at other people's highlight reels. And that can also be, that happens again. Let's just look at business as an example. when we look at, and this kind of drives me crazy, and this is a whole other episode, when we look at coaches, this tends to happen with coaching specifically, people talking about their income. There is no other that I can think of. Maybe there is. And if so, like, please let me know. There is no other field, career path where, number one, we are all up in each other's space all the time and we can see absolutely everything that everybody is doing. But also, there's no other career where people use their income as their marketing. There's just not. Right? If you are going to, I don't know, you're trying to choose a new dentist. Nobody, like, you're not like, oh, how much money did you make as a dentist? Because that's going to impact whether I work with you. If you want to see a therapist, you're not like, oh, how much money do you make in your therapy practice? Because that's going to impact how I see you. No, in fact, that would be incredibly rude, right? We don't ask that. Yet in the coaching industry, it is common. I see it, dozens of times every day. And if you have an online business, I'm sure you do as well. I made 5 figures this month. I had a $10,000 launch. I had this, I had this, I had this. And again, that's the highlight reel. They don't tell you about the dozen launches that failed. They don't tell you about all the stuff in their business that is going wrong. They don't tell you about the 5 years that it took them to get there. They just tell you about that one launch. So again, it's the highlight reel, right? So it's the self-comparison. We are aiming for that sort of not real thing. And the last, and another really important thing, like I said, it's not authentic, right? So when we are constantly striving for perfection, we're not being our real selves, because being human is messy and it is imperfect. And it means that sometimes we have bad days and we are not always happy and we are not always joyful and we do not always want to see people and we do not always, we're not always on. We're all human beings. Yet when we are striving for perfection, there is this idea that, like, you're not allowed to be human. You can't just have a pimple on your face and be okay with it. You can't just have a bad hair day and still do a video. You have to have the perfect surroundings. You have to have the perfect look. You have to have the perfect body. You have to have the perfect business. And none of that is you. And the most beautiful thing about you is you. The best thing about you is that you are you. You are nobody else. We are not clones of each other. Our businesses are not clones of each other. Our bodies are not clones. Our personalities are not clones. Our relationships are not clones. And that is the amazing thing about them. So if you are constantly striving for perfectionism, you are moving away from your real, true, raw self. And if you just heard that scratch, the dogs are at the door. And there's a little bit of whining happening and I'm not going to let them in. So please just roll with me on this one. Hopefully they don't get any louder. So all of this being said, if you are struggling with perfectionism, if being your real self feels really hard, maybe even impossible, if you feel like you won't be accepted, if you feel like it's perfect or nothing, what can you do? Where can you start? So number one, I really want to encourage you, start being real where it is safe to be, right? There's this idea that, if I'm like, stop being perfect, stop being yourself. You don't just have to stop everything. Maybe you have been, trying to get the perfect body and the perfect skin and trying to get the perfect Instagram profile and get the perfect relationship and get perfect everything. I'm not telling you to stop trying. What I'm saying is start being real where it is safe to do so. Start with one place. Start with one place. And maybe that is in your romantic relationship, if you're in one and it's safe to do so. Maybe that is with a coach or with a counselor. Maybe it's with your sister, your best friend. Maybe it is, for entrepreneurs out there, maybe it is finding a group of people in a similar situation where you can just be like, just vent and just be your real self, right? Find your people. But regardless of where it is, I really want to encourage you to find a place where you can start being your real self, start showing up messy, start dropping the veil of perfectionism, and just begin to experiment with it a little bit. Um, and like I said before, even when you are, I mean, I'm quite conscious of not being perfect in my life. I've never been a perfectionist, but it still happens, right? I still have this idea of, oh, I don't have the perfect environment, I can't record, or I haven't done my hair, so I shouldn't be on video. Like it still comes up. This is going to come up. Okay. So it's not about dropping it forever. It's just about being conscious, starting to be real. And part of this also, sort of step 2 in this 3-step process, is explore who you are. And this is really important because if you have been on the perfectionist train for a long time, if you have been striving to be somebody, reach some certain level, there is a chance, and I have seen this many times, right? There is a chance that you may have strayed so far from your truth that you might be a little bit lost. And that's okay, right? There's no judgment in that. Absolutely zero judgment. This is the world that we live in, and we are all pushed to want perfection. But it's up to you whether or not you continue to go there. So if you are ready, maybe start exploring who you are. What do you really want? Do you really want to show up on Instagram perfectly every day? Or would it just feel like such a load off if you could just like show up as your real self, show your truth? Would it feel really good to not have a perfectly curated feed? Like, make it messy. Also, if you don't know what messy looks like, come look at mine because it's messy. It is not curated at all, right? So would that feel really good? Would it feel really good to just release the expectations around that and explore what feels good to you? And maybe this also means exploring who you are in your life outside of business, right? Maybe this looks like exploring who you want to be in your relationships. Have you been being the people pleaser because you didn't want to let anybody down? You're trying to be perfect. Is that who you want to keep being? Does that fill your cup? Does that fill you with joy, making everybody else happy? Maybe to a certain extent. But does it also feel exhausting and kind of like burnout? Maybe to a certain extent. So maybe who do you want to be instead? Do you want to be that woman who sets really healthy boundaries, leads by example? Do you want to be that woman who shows up for herself in a whole new way? Do you want to be that woman who leads by example using joy and happiness and that beautiful vivaciousness for life instead of scraping up what is left at the bottom of the barrel after you've given to everybody else? Right? So explore who you are and who you want to be. And number 3, and this is the most important one, absolutely hands down, the most important step, have fun. Have fun with it. The pursuit of perfectionism can be exhausting, can lead to burnout, like I said. It can play a huge part in self-comparison. It can take you away from your truth. And coming back to this needs to feel good. And it's not going to feel good every second of every day. That's not what I'm saying. But I really want to encourage you to have fun with this. How can you have fun and start being your real self? Is it taking messy selfies and showing them? Is it showing up with your partner in a new way? How can you have fun with this? How can you bring more joy and laughter and fun into this? Because your true self, I would bet, isn't all that serious. Maybe it is, and that's fine, right? We are all different, but I'm betting that you have been a lot more serious or a lot more curated or a lot more careful than you would like to be. So have fun exploring this, right? Test your own boundaries, test your own limits, figure out who you are, who you really are, who you want to be, and start being that little by little in a safe place. And my invitation for you today is, if you have listened to all of this and you're like, girl, I do not have a place where I can be my real self. I don't have a relationship where I can be my real self. I don't even really know who that is. And I certainly have no idea how to have fun with this process. Please be gentle with yourself. Okay. And my invitation for you is that I would love to talk to you. Allow me during a free call, right? I have free 30-minute calls. There's a link in the show notes. Or if you're watching this on Instagram, there's a link in my bio. But I really just want to invite you to come in. Come in, have a free call with me. We do it on Zoom so we can see each other. And maybe that 30 minutes is where you start being your real self. Maybe that 30 minutes is where you start to explore who you really are and what you really want. Maybe that 30 minutes is where we look at how you can have more fun. How can you embrace more of your real self, your real body, your real personality, your real face, your real business, your truth? How can you start embracing that more, dropping the veil of perfectionism and showing up in the world as you? Because let me tell you, it is such a weight off when you do. Such a weight off. So if that resonates with you and you would like to take me up on that, like I said, there is a link either in the show notes or on Instagram. There is a link in my bio. So please go ahead and do that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If you have listened through this whole episode with me, perfectionism is something that is rampant in all of society. And I think all of us fall into that trap at some point, but it is totally a choice, right? You do not have to stay there. You can reclaim your power, reclaim your truth, reclaim real life with dogs in the background scratching at the door, and be your true self. The world needs more of you.